Is mainstream media deceiving your kids? Join us for this feisty conversation today on Family Vision. Rob Rienow here with Visionary Family Ministries alongside my wonderful wife, Amy. And the plan for today's episode was a Q&A episode. We get a lot of questions online. By the way, anytime you all have questions that you'd like us to talk about on Family Vision, just email them to us, podcast@visionaryfam.com. However, we got one question today that we thought was worthy of a whole episode as we started exploring.
It's actually worthy of about probably 3 episodes in reality. It is a big question.
It's a big one, right. So we're actually just going to skim it over.
Yes.
But before we get there, just a couple personal invitations to you. We want to see you at some of our upcoming live events. October 28th, Wheaton Academy in West Chicago, Illinois. We're going to be doing a parent seminar, Navigating the World of Sexuality. Then we have a Visionary Family Conference in Green Bay, Wisconsin on November 5th. November 12th is our big Thanksgiving ball at the Abington in Glen Ellen. This is an event you absolutely do not want to miss. You can get the information for all of our upcoming events at our website, visionaryfam.com, and click that events button. Okay, sweetheart, here's the question. Are there specific things we should teach our kids to help them interpret and filter the news from a Christian worldview?
Yeah, that is a huge question. And I'm so glad you're asking because we do have a lot to say about that. And as a side note, I have always been very much into the news. I'm kind of a news junkie. I'm a politics junkie. Like when my kids like to play games on their phones, if I'm on my phone, I'm reading a news website or I'm, following some rabbit trail that's interested me. So I do like talking about these things. But at the beginning of that question, it reminds me of this illustration that you share a lot, which is about understanding counterfeits. So Rob likes to share this illustration when he speaks about how important it is for our kids to be around biblical truth, to be around Christian worldview. And he uses the example of training people on counterfeit money. They're
part of the Secret Service,
I guess so. I don't know. But they're in a room, right, with real money. That's what they do. They spend so much time feeling, smelling, being around real bills that because they spend so much time with the real, they can then identify counterfeit money. And that applies to our kids first and foremost. We have to surround our kids so much with biblical truth. We have to surround them with good Christian worldview teaching. And they have to be so immersed in that they can recognize when they're getting counterfeit information. I mean, if they're not thoroughly exposed to the truth, if they're not, immersing in that in your home and getting that information into them, they're not going to be able to discern the lies. And one program for us that's helped us tremendously is Francis Schaeffer's material called How Then Shall We Live? We discovered this, probably 15 years ago now, and he has a video series that goes along with that. But he does an amazing job of really helping talk about how biblical thinking and biblical worldview, how that affects the current culture, how the art affects the culture of how people think, and music, all these things, and how these messages that we're surrounded with are not neutral, and how to identify how they're drifting from a biblical worldview. So that's an intentional program that we have done in our home with our kids that probably helped us the most with kind of tying together biblical worldview and what's happening in the culture around us.
Yeah. And at the end of Schaeffer's video series, he actually does talk about a manipulative media.
He does.
And he does this great example. So he gets their cameras out and they reenact or they film, I guess what you'd call a street riot or a street fight where the police come and break it up. And then he shows how using different angles of the video and different narrations from the newscaster. One newscast is the wonderful police came in and put down this very dangerous riot. And then the other newscast was about how these freedom fighters, right, were pushing back against, communist oppression or whatever it was.
Horrible police,
all
right.
all by just camera angles and narration and things like that. So, and you use this phrase. So one of the principles to teach your kids on this is that there is no neutral with any news. There's
Right.
no neutral with anything. Family Vision, our podcast, we are not neutral. The difference is we tell you up front every episode what our bias is, what our perspective is. We love the Lord. We are Christians. We want your family to love and follow God and follow Jesus forever. So we're not neutral. Okay, we have an intentional strategy about what we believe and what our goals are here. But news shows are tricky. See, they want you to think that they're not biased, that they're just telling you what happened, but it's never true. Right? It actually can't be true. I also want to address, I guess, this conversation. Part of the reason why it maybe feels a little uncomfortable is it kind of feels like we're talking about conspiracy theories. Right? That the people in the news are manipulating us, like mass propaganda and things like that. Even that's one of the ways you get insulted by, you're just a conspiracy theorist. So work with me here on this, or I'll ask you the questions. Okay,
great.
All right.
I don't know where he's going.
No,
with
I know
this,
you don't.
so.
Are there some really bad, dangerous, evil people in the world?
Yes.
Okay. Can those people acquire tremendous power through money, influence, government, corporations, whatever?
Absolutely.
Okay. Can those people sometimes get together and combine their evil plans to do more evil?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Should people who love Jesus and care about freedom and life and justice keep an eye out for like powerful bad guys who want to steal, kill, and destroy?
Yes.
Okay. So that's what a conspiracy theory is. Like there's bad guys conspiring and Christians and good people have a theory
Yes,
about
right,
it
that they-
because we want to shine attention to it. And the Bible speaks directly to this, Psalm 2. Why do the nations conspire and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth rise up and the rulers band together against the Lord
Yes.
and against his anointed.
Right. Right.
So God's like, hey, just so you
Right.
know, bad people with power are going to work together to do very bad things, and you ought to be aware of it. So here's my quote on that for you. The people who are most likely to hate conspiracy theories are the people who are conspiring. That's my theory.
That's a good theory. Well, and I wanted to add to that, I've just finished doing this Shine Bible study that we're going to start promoting very soon.
You're going to hear about that soon. You're going to love it.
But the verse, one of my theme verses is 1 John 5:19 that says, we know that we are children of God and the whole world is under the influence of the evil one. And the reason why we use that verse, it's not that God is not sovereign and not in control, because he is sovereign and in control. We would be foolish as Christians to not identify and see that power and be aware that there is no neutral. And we have been, I think, somewhat brainwashed as a culture to believe that there is such a thing as a neutral. I want to illustrate this as another way, and it comes to when we study certain Christian theologians or a popular Christian speaker, again, because we know they are Christian, right? We will have a very critical lens as far as like, well, what are they teaching? What do they think about these certain topics? And we can kind of discern, okay, I'm not sure. I agree with them on maybe 80%. I don't agree about them about this 20%. It's because I have knowledge of where they're coming from. Does that make sense? But when our kids go to school or when our kids watch the news and you are reading a random science book or you are reading a history book, we are not trained to think, well, what is the worldview of these people presenting me this information?
That's so good.
We are left in the dark on that. We're supposed to assume that that information is coming in some sort of neutral form that's just fact. And we're not trained to question, well, what do these people think? So when we're watching the news, what is the person who is presenting or whoever wrote that news, what is their worldview? What are their values? Because I should know that information as I am discerning what they're telling me. Is it truth or is it a lie? That's part of the piece that I need. And we seem to accept that in the Christian world, and we can be very critical of who we listen to based on that information. And yet it's so interesting to me that there's this whole pool of secular information that we don't even question what their worldview is as they give us information that we are supposed to rely on.
Yeah. I think another thing parents can do as you have these conversations with your kids is ask your kids this question: why do you think that they chose this story?
Mm-hmm.
Every news service is choosing what stories to put in front of you and
Correct.
what stories to keep from you. And they're doing that very intentionally for their own biased reasons. And I'm not saying they're biases. You can have good biases and bad biases, but they're doing that for biased reasons. So even asking your child, what do you think the purpose of this story is? As you read this, are you coming away? How do you think about this person? Are you thinking better of them or worse of them? Better of this country, worse of this country? That's part of the bias or part of the choice that went into that story.
Can I add to that? Because this helped me a lot in evaluating the news. When I heard someone give this illustration, and it was really helpful. He basically said there is like this much information to know. We cannot even comprehend how much information is out there in the news for us to know. It is more than we can imagine. And yet our media is designed, let's say there's this much information, our media is designed to share about this much information of that big pot of information out there. And not only to share a little bit, but to create conflict in the little bit that they share. So therefore, it keeps us very confused because we're almost like finding people to disagree with, and we're fighting over points of view. But reality is there's so much more to learn. So when our kids watch the news, one of the biggest things that we can help them with is this concept of doing your own research, not just to accept what comes in front of you, but we now have access to a tool, the internet, that allows us to go and do our own research in a way that so many other generations didn't have that ability right at their fingertips. And I had to give a big shout out to my daughter, Melly, who's a sophomore in high school and probably my favorite person to talk about news and politics with. I'm sorry, honey, you are a close favorite, but right now she's moved in the favorite spot.
I'm good with that.
Because she loves to show me the videos that come across her screen. She loves to, we talk all the time, like, do you think that's true? Or what are the possibilities here? But what is so awesome is that she has such a critical mind. And she is asking all the right questions as how to get to the truth. And we also acknowledge, well, it could be this or it could be that we really don't know 100%. But it's the critical thinking that we want to get our kids doing.
Right. Absolutely. And just making that kind of our final point here, teaching your kids to have a healthy doubt and skepticism for anything they see online, any mainstream media. Now, especially in the world of AI and VR,
oh my goodness, yeah.
You can no longer even trust a video of some famous person saying something because it could be completely AI generated. And we know that this conversation, we probably opened up a whole bunch of cans of worms and let all the worms out, and we didn't make any effort to put the worms back in the can. So this would be a perfect opportunity for you to email us your questions. Hey, what about this? Hey, what about that? podcast@visionaryfam.com. And if you're not already a follower or subscriber to Family Vision, please go ahead and push that button. You push the share button. Share today's show. Again, this was sort of a feisty one. Share it with a friend or family member that you think it might generate a great conversation. We love having you be a part of the Family Vision community. Special thanks to our audio producer, Yair with Gap Digital, and our video guys, Ryan and Duncan from Swim Media. That's Swim with a Y. We appreciate you. And as always, we'd love to hear from you, your prayer requests, your comments. Again, podcast@visionaryfam.com. And we're looking forward to our next time together with you on Family Vision.